Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the TCLF One on One series. Through the One on One series, we aim to interact with the best legal professionals from India and around the world. Today, we'll be talking about a very interesting topic that is emergency arbitration in India. And we're honored to host Ms. Radhika Bishwajit Dubey for this conversation. Ma'am is currently a partner at Cyril Amachan Mangaldas, which is one of the top law firms of the country and has years of experience in dispute resolution and arbitration. Ma'am, it's an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you, Shashwat,
Ma'am, just to set the
for
tone for the
having.
conversation and narrow down to the theme that we're talking about today, could you start with the basics? What is the meaning and utility of emergency arbitration? When does it actually come into the picture?
So, thank you for the question, Shashwat, and thank you for having me for this and thinking of me for this episode. Now, to understand the meaning and utility of emergency arbitration, I think we first need to understand how emergency arbitration developed into such a popular pre-arbitral mechanism all over the world. So, just to give a brief background, or let's dwell into the history of emergency arbitration. The regime in place today has got its roots in rule innovations dating back to 1990s. In 1990, the Court of Arbitration of the ICC introduced a rule for a pre-arbitral referee procedure. Now, subsequently, in 1999, the AAA, which is the American Arbitration Association, adopted optional rules for emergency measures of protection as part of its commercial arbitration rules. Now, these also had an opt in nature, and only if the parties opted in could the AAA appoint an emergency arbitrator with a mandate to prevent immediate and irreparable loss or damage. The first institution to incorporate opt out emergency arbitrator provisions into its rules was the International Division of the AAA, the International Center for Dispute Resolution. In ICDR's 2006 rule revision, ICDRC added Article 37 detailing out emergency measures of protection. This revision made emergency arbitration available by default to all parties. Although the parties could, of course, elect to not apply the emergency arbitration provisions. Now, in the next 10 years, almost we've seen all leading arbitral institutions followed. And as a result, now availability of emergency arbitration has now become a global norm. Coming to your question, what is the meaning and utility? An emergency arbitration hearing comes into picture when parties move to protect the assets and the evidence involved in the dispute for interim reliefs, where there is an upcoming arbitration proceeding in front of an arbitral tribunal which is yet to be sort of constituted. The concept of emergency arbitration has acted as a beneficial mechanism because it acts as a cure to various other, let's say snags in the system, such as, lack of confidence in the national courts to grant urgent reliefs, leakage of confidential information, then of course the exaggerated litigation, the time and the cost involved, etc. So it is seen to be the most efficient way to sort of, get urgent pro tem or conservatory measures to parties, who can't afford to wait for the formation of the arbitral tribunal. In the fundamental sense, emergency arbitration provides a solution to the problem of parties, who are anxious between invocation of arbitral proceedings and constitution of arbitral tribunal. Uh, by agreeing to emergency arbitration provisions, both parties have the right to approach emergency arbitrator appointed until an arbitral tribunal has been constituted, and thereby move to safeguard their interests or their assets by way of an interim order without having to wait and approach the already maybe overburdened court for the same relief. Moreover, the pandemic, as we're all, suffering or facing, the world has sort of, redefined the terms urgent and emergency reliefs more in the context of legal proceedings. Therefore, the concept of emergency arbitration is now exceedingly valuable for parties than it was ever before, I feel.
That's very insightful, ma'am. So at the very heart of it lies, I think, the principle that parties want to secure some interim relief and they cannot wait for the constitution of the arbitral tribunal. And that's why they proceed for emergency arbitration so that they can secure their assets or prevent that irreparable harm. Now, there is a lot of discussion, particularly about India and its approach towards emergency arbitration. Fundamentally, lie two questions: the appointment of an emergency arbitrator and the enforceability of an award passed by such an arbitrator. So, can you, in very brief terms, summarize this approach for us by highlighting some of the major developments that have taken place around these issues in India?
Sure, Shashwat. So, you see, India's approach towards recognition of emergency arbitration and enforcement of awards passed by an emergency arbitrator can be seen from a standpoint of three different institutions involved in this process. The legislative institutions, the arbitral institutions, and then the judicial institutions, if I may put it like that. Now, what is the role of the legislative institutions? To recognize emergency arbitrations, the Law Commission's 246th report on the amendments to the Arbitration and Conciliation Act proposed an amendment to Section 2D of the Act. Now, this amendment was to ensure that the institutional rules, such as, the SEAC arbitration rules or the ICC rules, or any other rule which provides for an appointment of an emergency arbitrator, are given statutory recognition in India. There was but what happened eventually was that this amendment proposed was not incorporated, but we'll come to that judgment later. Everyone's been talking about it, but the sort of logic or justification given by the court in the judgment is that the courts have sort of recognized it, so, and it was already inbuilt, so there was no special requirement to recognize it within the act. Now, coming to the role of Indian arbitration institutions, though the term emergency arbitration did not gain legislative recognition, like I just discussed, the Indian arbitration institutions, have made significant efforts to try and absorb the term emergency arbitration in their rules by making procedural rules regarding the same. The Indian arbitral institutions statutorily are not cogent enough, yet they have framed rules which are by and large, synonymous to the leading international arbitration institutional rules. If I have to give some examples, the DIAC has incorporated the emergency arbitration within its realm. Then the International Council of Arbitration, the ICA, under its Rule 33, read with Rule 36.3, has incorporated the provisions of emergency arbitration. Then the Mumbai Center for International Arbitration Rules 2016 under Rule 14 have incorporated emergency arbitration. So the arbitral institutions have somehow brought in within its rule the realm of emergency arbitrator. Now, coming to the judicial institutions, so to say, before Amazon, and this is the case law I was talking about earlier, everyone knows about it. Before the Amazon and future dispute ruling before the Supreme Court on emergency arbitration, there was a lack of judicial guidance on the point of enforcement of emergency awards. All prior rulings concerned emergency awards issued in foreign seated arbitrations. Some cases that dealt with this issue, if I have to elaborate on, is, for example, Raffles Design, where the Delhi High Court granted interim relief to the applicant in favor of emergency award, in whose favor the emergency award had been issued. Now, That said, the court's findings were largely independent of the findings in the award rendered in the emergency arbitration. So while the relief was granted in the emergency arbitration proceedings, but the reasoning being given by the Delhi High Court while accepting the reliefs given in the emergency arbitration award were very different. Now, similarly, like in HSBC PI Holdings versus Evitel, the Bombay High Court granted relief similar to the ones granted in the Emergency Arbitrators Award, which was Singapore seated emergency arbitration. And then, of course, the applicant accordingly succeeded in enforcing it. Then the Delhi High Court, now this is a notable ruling in Ashwini Minda, rejecting a party's request for interim relief under the cover of a petition of a Section 9. This party had, failed to obtain a similar relief at the first instance before the emergency arbitrator. The court, in effect, indirectly recognized the outcome of the emergency arbitration. So the court really held, and I quote, that having invoked the mechanism of emergency arbitrator and inviting a detailed and reasoned order, it is not open for the applicant to take a second bite at the cherry. There has been no change of circumstance after the said order, as none has been pleaded or even argued. So this is what the court came at. So indirectly, somewhere we've seen through these rulings that even before the future of the ruling, the courts have somewhere recognized the concept of emergency arbitration.
Correct, ma'am. You just mentioned about the infamous Amazon Future dispute and the recent Supreme Court ruling. And from your insightful views, what I can gather is that the judicial approach consistently has been that towards or in favor of the outcome of the emergency arbitrations. So, but the recent ruling of the SCA, I think, puts a rubber stamp on that approach and says that this is our approach and we will recognize it. So, in your personal opinion, how would this benefit the Indian jurisdiction insofar as its image of a pro-arbitration jurisdiction is concerned? How do you measure this judgment?
So, Shashwat, according to me, I think it's a welcome decision. The Supreme Court, through this ruling, provides the much needed clarity on the aspect of emergency arbitration and the consequential awards arising from it. Earlier, the parties, as we've seen the trend, earlier parties had to file a Section 9 petition under the Arbitration and Conciliation Act based on the Emergency Arbitration Award and apply for a similar relief to be granted by the civil court. However, courts had the liberty to take an entirely different view and even disregard the Emergency Arbitration Award completely. So due to this, no sanctity sort of, could be attached to the process of emergency arbitration, and enforcement of emergency arbitration awards with respect to Indian jurisdiction. I would put it this way that, the whole purpose or the object behind having an emergency arbitration just went down the drain. So as a direct consequence, India's arbitration regime was lagging, far behind its counterparts on this aspect. However, after this Supreme Court judgment, parties who wish to arbitrate in India or engage in an Indian seated arbitration can do it freely without unnecessary, anxiety regarding provision and enforceability of the interim reliefs provided by the emergency arbitrator in India. This decision, will have a tremendous impact, according to me, in bringing India at par with the global arbitration standards, and will immensely contribute in establishing India's position as a pro-arbitration regime. Additionally, I feel the decision will also help establish Indian jurisdiction as an attractive, arbitral seat from the perspective of enforcing interim reliefs obtained in an arbitration. It is also likely to boost, the institutional arbitration concept in India, since emergency arbitration facilities only available for institutional arbitrations and not ad hoc arbitrations. Additionally, from a commercial standpoint, I feel it is expected this decision will boost foreign investment in India, as it signals, towards strong arbitration enforcement regime being brought about in India. It will also help, I think, better the perception of foreign investors about the validity of agreements entered in India or with Indian counterparts. However, I think a point to be noted is that that this judgment is only in relation to emergency arbitrations decisions made in arbitrations seated in India. So emergency arbitration decisions made in arbitration seated outside India will not, however, benefit from this judgment and cannot presently be directly enforced by the Indian courts. On the question about enforcement beyond, SIAC rules, this judgment, I think, sets a very important precedent in giving importance to party autonomy as one of the pillars, of arbitration in India. It is expected that that this precedent would flow to enforcement of emergency awards made under the rules of other arbitration institutions as well, and will not be limited to such emergency awards made only in the SIAC rule. So let's see, and let's hope similar decisions come in the future, and it further adds clarity to at least this aspect.
Indeed, ma'am. As you've rightly pointed out, the value of interim relief in an arbitration is immense. And I think what this judgment does is that it puts an end to a situation wherein a party had to fight two battles for a single cause, as you've rightly pointed out. So let's hope. And just out of curiosity, the next set of questions are, based on my curiosity and the curiosity of our viewers. So what do you think, is a solution to a party which suffers a breach? What are the avenues available to a party which suffers a breach as a result of non-compliance by the other party with an emergency arbitrator award? What are the avenues available?
So I touched upon this in my previous answer to your question, but to elaborate on this further, in case the award rendered by the emergency arbitrator is not honored by any party, the party affected must approach the civil courts for enforcement of the emergency arbitration award. Now, before this Supreme Court ruling, due to there being no judicial guidance on the validity of emergency awards and the explicit non-inclusion of the concept of emergency arbitrations, this is despite being recommended by the law commissions, parties proceeded on the assumption, as you also mentioned, that interim awards, whether made by foreign courts, emergency arbitrators, or arbitral tribunals, were not sort of enforceable in India, or that the emergency awards were not directly enforceable in India. Therefore, the parties were left with only one of the two options, in my opinion. The first one basically was to file a fresh suit for enforcement of the emergency award. Now, this was not practical, given the fact that there were formal court procedure which would have to be followed, then the length of time required for obtaining a meaningful relief was completely, gone for a toss. Resorting to this option, therefore, would have obviously defeated the entire purpose of obtaining urgent relief. The word urgent really would make no sense by resorting to an emergency arbitration. The second option, which did see or meet with some success, which we've earlier discussed during our discussion, was to apply for identical interim reliefs from an Indian court using the order of the award passed by the emergency arbitrator in the party's support. Now, this route effectively amounted to a substitute for strict enforcement of the emergency award by a court. But that said, there was nothing that explicitly required the court to grant the same reliefs as granted by the emergency arbitrator. And the court could, so there was a risk, but there was no other choice. The court could refuse or modify the reliefs earlier granted. However, now due to this ruling, an emergency award in an Indian seated arbitration can directly be enforced by Indian courts in the same way as if, it's a decree of an Indian court through Section 17 of the Indian Arbitration and Conciliation Act. Whereas for foreign seated arbitrations, parties would have to approach the corresponding civil courts of that seat to get a judgment ratifying the emergency arbitration award, after which the parties would have to approach the Indian courts to get that judgment of the foreign court ratifying the emergency award enforced in India through, the relevant provisions of the CPC, such as, the 44A, which is the execution of decrees passed by courts in reciprocating territory. However, in international commercial arbitrations, parties can still approach, Indian courts. We all know BALCO under Section 9 of the Act for the purpose of enforcing the emergency arbitration award, provided that the parties have not entered into an agreement, to the contrary, to exclude these provisions from the agreement.
And ma'am, how do we look at emergency arbitration from a comparative perspective? How do other jurisdictions, deal with emergency arbitrations? Do they explicitly recognize these awards in their statutes or through the judgments?
Yes, so as I had discussed briefly and touched upon the history of how the emergency arbitration evolved, the first institution to incorporate the opt-out emergency arbitrator provisions into its rules was the International Division of the American Arbitration Association, which is the International Center for Dispute Resolution. Now, their 2006 rule revision added Article 37, detailing out, the emergency measures of protection. This revision made to emergency arbitration available by default to all parties, although the parties could, of course, elect not to apply for emergency arbitrator provisions. But over the decade, we've seen almost all leading arbitral institutions globally have followed the suit, and as a result, now availability of emergency arbitration has become a global norm. Some of the arbitral institutions which has adopted or taken to this concept is, the SCC, the ICC, SIAC, of course. Then you have the Hong Kong International Arbitration Center. All these institutions have incorporated a mechanism in their rules for emergency arbitration on an opt-out rather than an opt-in basis, thus making it applicable unless otherwise agreed by the parties. In fact, jurisdictions like Singapore, Hong Kong, New Zealand, Switzerland have given statutory recognition to the concept of emergency arbitration, so as to ensure a harmonious adaptation, of the international arbitral practices into their domestic regimes. It may also be seen that, numerous institutions have now introduced provisions that provide for some form of emergency relief, either through appointment of an emergency arbitrator or through an expedited, formation of the tribunal, and the examples of which I have given already. Some jurisdictions have, taken active steps for enforcement of awards, orders passed by emergency arbitrators. Like, for example, the Singapore Parliament introduced amendments to the International Arbitration Act in 2012. The amendments make it clear that awards or orders given by, the emergency arbitrators are enforceable in Singapore. The amendments have accorded the emergency awards the same legal status as that of a, regularly constituted arbitral tribunal. this legislative amendment, distinguishes Singapore from other institutions, as it provides, more clarity that is otherwise unavailable, I would say, in other jurisdiction. Then, the other jurisdictions have also taken steps to address the uncertainty regarding the legal status of the decisions made by the emergency arbitrators. Like, for example, Singapore and Austria have also enacted laws to establish the role of emergency arbitrators. Uh, so perhaps I think Singapore, the US, and their pro emergency arbitration stance provides, good example for how some of these ambiguities may be addressed. However, question still remains as to how emergency arbitrators' decisions will be enforced outside the jurisdiction, and what sanctions should apply to parties who refuse to, abide by the decisions of the emergency arbitrators outside the jurisdiction.
Indeed, ma'am, that's a very interesting viewpoint, and these are certain questions which will come up in the future. And with this, we'll be moving on to the last question that we have, and talking about the elephant in the room and the statutory recognition part. Uh, so, even though the Supreme Court has given out a positive ruling recently regarding emergency arbitration and its enforceability in the Indian regime, do you think that there is still a need to statutorily recognize, make changes to the statute, that is the Arbitration and Conciliation Act, and explicitly recognize uh, the awards passed by emergency arbitrators, so as to make it clear for once for all that that these are recognized under the Indian regime.
See, one thought process is this, that, and the court also has expressly mentioned the reason why in the first place the Law Commission's recommendation was not included in the Act. Now, if you go by that logic, then of course there is no requirement for the statutory recognition. But I am of the opinion that this Act, the whole Act itself, we need a new Act. What has happened over the years is this, that so many amendments, so many provisions and sub provisions have though helped the lawyers and their practice, of course, but this is left the corporates, the clients, really confused. Some courts are passing some decisions, the other court is passing a contrary decision, then a lot of scope is left for interpretation. So from that perspective, though, as a lawyer, I'm not complaining about it. I must confess that. But I think it's time that emergency arbitrations are accorded statutory recognition by the legislature, just for the purpose of making it easier, across all levels of the Indian court system to accept the concept of emergency arbitrations. In its absence, I think that dingling question will always remain. So from that perspective, I feel, especially in a country like India, for uniformity perspective, statutory recognition is sort of maybe necessary. But I personally also, like I was mentioning, that according to me, to make India a pro arbitration hub, well-founded structural changes need to be brought in through legal legislative commandments, which will go a long way in cementing India's position as a attractive arbitration friendly hub. Like I mentioned, the act itself, has undergone major amendments. Now we need streamlining. We need, I think, a new act. The time is, I think, absolutely right to have a new singular composite, yet a very simple arbitration act which promotes, the fundamental concepts of arbitration, like party autonomy and the uniformity, by incorporating the international standards. I also feel that with the growing commercial arbitration practice in the country, it is the need of the hour to have a dedicated arbitration bar with lawyers practicing and specializing in arbitration exclusively. This will go a long way, in ensuring arbitral facilities, time discipline, effective resolution of commercial disputes. Today, as lawyers, everyone's doing everything, but a dedicated arbitration bar, I think, is I think important. Then I feel with a large bulk of arbitration cases reaching to the lower judiciary now, every high court, we all know, doesn't have original side jurisdiction barring five. So what happens is this, that a lot of your matters like a section 9 will go before a city civil court. So therefore there is a need to train judges across the board, on arbitration law practices and the core principles of non-interference, section 5, minimal judicial interference. At the same time, I think regular training is also needed for arbitration counsel. So this again will help in making an arbitral friendly foundation for India. Then, of course, I will echo what we just recently heard from the Supreme Court on appointment of young trained lawyers and technical experts as arbitrators rather than having retired maybe judges. This would be cost effective and would ensure greater time devotion of the tribunal. This is my view. Then greater emphasis should be laid on establishing world class arbitral institutions across the country. We have some very good institutions like the DIAC and the MCI who are doing a great job, but we need more which are capable of handling the international commercial arbitrations with delivering effective arbitral award. We need something like a SIAC, an Indian version of SIAC. So these are sort of comprehensive changes which I sort of feel are required for making India an international friendly jurisdiction for arbitration.
These are some very interesting points, ma'am, and I agree to most of these. And one particularly interesting point that you've raised is that there's so much to navigate the conflicting judicial opinions that it's almost as if the language of the statute has become redundant, because essentially every question of law is going to the court. There's nothing clear from the statute. So there's a time, and I think this is the perfect time to incorporate these conflicting opinions and adopt a uniform approach, so that at least the parties who want to enter into the arbitration know what's the principle essentially, regarding a particular point. So I think these are some very interesting points. And with this, ma'am, we come to an end of this conversation. Thank you very much. I've personally enjoyed this conversation, and your views were particularly insightful. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Shashwat. Thank you once again for having me.
Honor, ma'am.